There is a 25-second window every single morning that most Americans over 60 are unknowingly using against their own heart. Not the food they eat, not whether they exercise, not their medication. Something that happens in the first half minute after the alarm goes off. A sequence so automatic, so deeply wired into the routine of daily life that almost nobody has ever stopped to question it. And the reason your doctor has almost certainly never brought it up is not negligence. It's because most physicians are trained to look at the obvious risk factors. Cholesterol, blood sugar, weight, blood pressure readings taken at rest in a clinical office, not what happens inside your cardiovascular system in the 25 seconds after your body transitions from sleep to waking. But cardiologists who study sudden cardiac events, and I mean the ones who are asking the uncomfortable questions about when these events happen, not just why, have been quietly pointing at the same window of time for years. Here's the number that stopped me cold when I first reviewed it. Fatal cardiac events are 3 times more likely to occur in the first 3 hours after waking than at any other comparable window during the day. 3 times, not slightly elevated, not marginally higher, 3 times. A Harvard-linked analysis calculated that the relative risk of heart attack in that early post-waking window is 3-fold. And that figure has been replicated across cardiovascular research for decades. And the reason that window is so dangerous has everything to do with a chain reaction that begins the moment your brain starts surfacing from sleep. A chain reaction most people accelerate rather than manage in those critical first seconds. Stay with me through this entire video because I'm going to walk you through exactly what is happening inside your body during those 25 seconds. And I'm going to give you a 4-step morning sequence that takes less than 2 minutes, costs nothing, and works with your body's biology instead of against it. I'm Dr. Franklin, and this channel exists for one group of people, adults over 60. My focus is always the same, not just understanding disease after it arrives, but learning to read the signals your body sends long before the damage becomes visible. Before we get into this, I'd love to hear from you. Where are you watching from today? Drop your city or country in the comments. I read every single one, and it really helps me see who's part of this community. Let's start with what your body is actually doing as you wake up, because this is the part that almost nobody explains. Most people think of sleep as a single consistent state. You close your eyes, your body rests, you wake up. Simple. But the physiology is far more complex than that. And the transition out of sleep is where the foundation for your morning cardiovascular risk is quietly being laid. During deep sleep, your nervous system is running in what I call a recovery mode. Heart rate is slow and steady. Blood pressure is at its daily low point, sometimes 10 to 20 points below your typical waking reading. Your stress hormone levels are suppressed. Your blood vessels are relaxed and dilated. Your heart, which works constantly without a break, is getting its best opportunity for genuine rest. But here's what changes as your body prepares to wake. In the final hours of sleep, your body's internal clock, driven by what scientists call the circadian rhythm, begins a slow, quiet buildup. Cortisol starts its pre-dawn rise, but the real surge happens fast, and it happens the moment you wake up. Research published in peer-reviewed journals and confirmed repeatedly in human circadian studies shows that cortisol levels spike by 38 to 75%, averaging around 50% within just 30 to 45 minutes of opening your eyes. Scientists call this the cortisol awakening response, and it is one of the most powerful hormonal events your body produces in any 24-hour period. Alongside that, your adrenal glands are simultaneously releasing epinephrine adrenaline. Together, these two hormones flood your bloodstream in the minutes immediately after waking. These hormones are not the problem by themselves. They serve a purpose. They are your body's way of getting your cardiovascular system ready for the demands of being awake. They raise your heart rate. They increase your blood pressure. They constrict your blood vessels slightly to push more circulation toward your brain and muscles. For a 40-year-old with elastic arteries and clean vessel walls, that system works beautifully. But after 60, 3 things have changed. First, your arteries are measurably stiffer. The elastic tissue in arterial walls degrades naturally with age. A stiff artery cannot absorb pressure, surges the way a flexible one does. The same wave of hormonal pressure that a younger cardiovascular system barely notices can cause a genuine spike in someone over 60. Second, for many people who feel completely well, who are doing everything right, there is plaque in the arterial walls. Not enough to cause symptoms during a routine exam. Not enough to show up on a standard EKG, but enough that a sudden pressure surge can crack the surface of a vulnerable plaque deposit. And a cracked plaque doesn't just bleed, it triggers an immediate clotting response. A clot in a coronary artery is a heart attack. A clot that breaks off and travels to the brain is a stroke. Third, and this is the part almost nobody talks about, your blood itself is different in the morning. After 6 to 8 hours without any fluid intake, you wake up meaningfully dehydrated. Your blood is thicker and more viscous than it was when you fell asleep. Your clotting factors, the proteins that initiate the process of clot formation, are at their highest concentration of the entire 24-hour day. So when your alarm sounds, you are already inside a biological window, where your heart is working against stiffer pipes under a hormonal surge with blood that is primed to clot faster than normal. And then most people do the one thing that makes every single part of that equation worse. They sit up and swing their legs over the side of the bed in one motion immediately. That's the 25C and mistake. And I understand why it seems like nothing, because it is so ordinary, so mundane, so completely unremarkable in the middle of a Tuesday morning that it has never once occurred to most people to question it. But here is what that movement does to your cardiovascular system at that precise moment. When you are lying flat, your blood is distributed relatively evenly throughout your body. Gravity is not a significant factor. Your heart pumps, blood circulates, everything flows. The moment you go vertical, and especially if you do it quickly, gravity immediately pulls a significant volume of blood downward. Blood pools in the large veins of your legs and abdomen. Your brain receives less blood. Your blood pressure at the head drops rapidly. In a healthy younger cardiovascular system, a reflex called the baroreceptor reflex kicks in almost instantly. Sensors in your arterial walls detect the pressure drop, signal the heart to beat faster, signal the blood vessels to constrict, and pressure is restored in 2 to 3 seconds. But in adults over 60, that reflex is slower, the signaling takes longer, the vessels don't constrict as quickly, and before that compensation happens, blood pressure can drop 15, 20, sometimes 30 points within just seconds of standing. You may know this feeling, that gray, foggy, slightly unsteady moment right when you first get out of bed in the morning. Many people over 60 experience it regularly and have simply filed it away as a normal part of aging. It is not normal. It has a medical name, orthostatic hypotension, and it is a signal that your cardiovascular system is struggling to manage that rapid postural change. Research published in Science Direct defines it as a drop of 20 mmHg of mercury or more in systolic blood pressure within 3 minutes of standing, and studies show it affects approximately 20 to 30% of adults over the age of 70, meaning 1 in 4 or 5 of you watching this right now may be experiencing it every morning without realizing what it means. Here is where it becomes truly dangerous for the morning window specifically. When your blood pressure drops suddenly after standing, your heart compensates by spiking. It has to. It receives an emergency signal to increase its output aggressively to restore circulation to the brain. And that compensatory spike, already layered on top of the cortisol surge, already working against stiffer arteries, already pushing thicker blood, is precisely where vulnerable hearts break down. The research is consistent. Studies tracking the timing of acute cardiac events show a pronounced cluster between 6 and 10 in the morning, not because morning is inherently dangerous in some vague way, but because of this specific convergence of biological factors triggered and worsened by the act of standing up too fast. The 25-second mistake is not dramatic. It doesn't feel dangerous. That is exactly what makes it so dangerous. If this is the first time anyone has explained what that dizzy morning feeling actually means for your heart, hit the like button right now. You just learned something your annual checkup probably never covered. I want to tell you about a patient I'll call Raymond. Raymond was 71, retired engineer, not a man who took his health casually. He wore a continuous glucose monitor to track his blood sugar trends, logged his blood pressure twice a day, and had been on a statin and a low-dose beta blocker for several years. His most recent echocardiogram was, as his cardiologist told him, reassuring. His stress test from the year before showed no significant ischemia. He was, by any standard clinical measure, managing his cardiovascular risk well. He woke up on an ordinary morning, silenced his phone alarm on the nightstand, and sat straight up. He was in the kitchen making coffee within 3 minutes of waking. His wife heard something and found him leaning against the counter, confused, sweating. He was in the hospital within the hour. The event Raymond experienced was not a massive life-ending heart attack. It was an acute coronary syndrome, a partial blockage caused by a ruptured plaque and a clot that formed around it. He recovered, but when I sat with him later and walked through the morning timeline, everything about it fit the pattern exactly. The alarm, the fast sit-up, the immediate movement, stiff arteries, morning blood viscosity, the compensatory spike that cracked a plaque that had been sitting quietly for years without ever announcing itself. What haunted Raymond, and I think what will stay with you, is that nothing about his clinical profile had given any indication that morning was dangerous for him specifically. Nobody had ever told him to slow down for the first 60 seconds of the day. Nobody had asked about his morning routine. I want to be precise about something. Raymond's medications, his monitoring, his stress testing, none of that was wrong. All of it was right. What was missing was this: the understanding that the transition from sleep to standing is its own cardiovascular event, and that the way you manage those 25 seconds matters independently of everything else you do for your heart. We made changes before Raymond went home, simple ones, completely free. And at his 6-month follow-up, his morning blood pressure log showed a noticeably more stable pattern. The dizziness he had always experienced and ignored, gone. He asked me the same question I've been asked many times in that context. Why didn't anyone think to mention this before? The honest answer is that most of what we know about morning cardiac risk lives in research journals and cardiology conference presentations. It doesn't always make it into the standard 15-minute annual checkup. That gap is part of why I make these videos. That gap between what the research shows and what actually reaches you is exactly why this channel exists. If you want to be the person in your family who knows this stuff before it matters, subscribe now. Every week I bring you one thing your checkup didn't cover. Now, I want to add a third piece to this picture because the cortisol surge and the postural blood pressure drop are well documented, but there's a third factor operating quietly in the background that most people never hear about. It has to do with your breathing pattern during sleep. Most people breathe through their mouths, at least some of the time during sleep, especially if they sleep on their backs, have mild nasal congestion, or have any degree of sleep-disordered breathing. Mouth breathing during sleep accelerates moisture loss significantly. Research shows water loss through expired air is 42% greater in mouth breathers compared to nose breathers. But even nose breathing over 6 to 8 hours causes meaningful water loss through respiration. The body loses an estimated half a liter to a full liter of fluid overnight through breathing and insensible perspiration alone with zero intake to replace it. The result is that by the time your alarm sounds, you are measurably dehydrated. And I don't mean the feeling of thirst. That signal often doesn't arrive until you're already well behind on fluid. I mean that at a measurable physiological level, your blood plasma volume is reduced. Here's why that matters for your heart specifically. Think of your bloodstream as a hydraulic system. The pump, your heart, is designed to work most efficiently when it's moving fluid of a specific consistency through pipes of a specific diameter. When plasma volume drops, the fluid gets thicker. The heart has to generate more pressure with each beat to move that thicker fluid through the same space. This has been documented since the 1960s. Researchers noted decades ago that hematocrit and blood viscosity are measurably elevated early in the morning, and the finding has been confirmed repeatedly since, including in a review published in Circulation Research, the Journal of the American Heart Association. Now combine that with stiffened arterial walls and a cortisol surge and a sudden postural blood pressure drop. You're asking a heart that is already working harder than its baseline to simultaneously manage 3 additional stressors, all within the same 25-second window. Clotting research adds another dimension. The proteins responsible for initiating clot formation follow a circadian rhythm. Chief among them is a protein called PAI-1 plasminogen activator inhibitor 1, which prevents your body from breaking down clots once they form. A study published in the journal Blood by researchers, including scientists from Harvard's Division of Sleep Medicine, found that PI1 peaks in the bloodstream at approximately 6:30 in the morning, precisely at the start of the highest risk cardiac window. Platelet aggregation factors follow the same pattern. This is not a flaw in human biology. It was likely protective in an era when waking up meant physical demands and potential injury. But in the context of vulnerable plaque and a morning hormonal surge, it becomes another variable loading the equation. The fix for this specific factor is almost embarrassingly simple: a glass of water, room temperature, not ice cold, taken before you stand up in the morning. Not coffee. Coffee is a diuretic. It increases fluid loss. Not juice, which spikes blood sugar before you've eaten anything. Water. 1 glass kept on the nightstand from the night before, so it's there before your feet ever touch the floor. The research on morning hydration in older adults consistently shows measurable reductions in blood viscosity and platelet activity when fluids are replaced promptly after waking. 1 glass doesn't fully replace overnight losses, but it begins the process at the exact moment when your cardiovascular system needs it most. Now, let me bring all three of these factors together into a practical morning sequence. I call it the 4-point waking protocol, and it takes 90 seconds to 2 minutes total. No equipment, no cost, no supplements, nothing to buy. This is a sequence that works with your body's biology instead of fighting it. Point 1, the stillness breath. 15 seconds. The moment your alarm sounds, do not move. This is non-negotiable. Stay flat. Your brain is about to receive its first cortisol and adrenaline wave of the day, and the single most effective thing you can do in the next 15 seconds is activate your parasympathetic nervous system, the calming branch before that wave peaks. Take 4 slow, deliberate breaths. Inhale through your nose for a count of 4. Hold for 1 count. Exhale through your mouth for a count of 6. That exhale longer than inhale pattern is not incidental. It directly stimulates the vagus nerve, which is the primary pathway through which your body applies the brakes to a stress response. A study published in Scientific Reports found that deep and slow breathing with an extended exhale increased vagal tone in both younger and older adults. And notably, the benefit was significantly greater in the older group. Your nervous system responds to this. The research confirms it. 4 breaths, 15 seconds, and you are activating the calming branch of your nervous system right at the moment the cortisol wave is cresting before it has the chance to drive your heart rate and blood pressure into a dangerous morning spike. Research on controlled breathing in adults over 60 shows measurable reductions in systolic blood pressure response when slow breathing is performed immediately upon waking 15 seconds flat on your back before anything else. That is your first protection. If you're still here with me and finding this helpful, take a moment to type 1 in the comments. It lets me know you're watching and getting value from this. Point 2, drink the water. 20 seconds. Before you sit up while you are still reclined, reach for the glass of water you placed on your nightstand the night before. Room temperature. Drink it now before you are upright. There is a practical reason for the timing. Once you are standing, the cardiovascular cascade has already begun. Drinking water before that transition gives your system a small but meaningful volume buffer, thinning the blood slightly, beginning to restore plasma volume, and reducing clotting factor concentration before your heart is asked to work against gravity. Tonight, before you sleep, fill a glass of water and put it on the nightstand. That one action done tonight changes tomorrow morning's cardiovascular risk profile. Point 3, the graduated transition. 45-60 seconds. Now, it is time to move, but slowly and in stages. First, roll to your side. This is important. Sitting straight up from flat engages your core abruptly and creates a more sudden pressure change than rolling to your side first. From your side, push yourself to sitting using your arms. Let your feet hang over the edge of the bed. Do not rush to stand. While you are sitting, do this. Rotate your ankles slowly, 10 circles in each direction. This is not physical therapy for its own sake. The calf muscles are the most powerful venous pump in your lower body. Contracting them by rotating your ankles actively pushes pulled blood back upward toward the heart, which begins rebuilding the circulation volume your brain is about to need when you stand. A study published in PubMed on ankle plantar dorsal flexion exercises found that just 1 minute of ankle movement before standing reduced the blood pressure drop upon rising from a median of 17.5 mm of mercury down to just 1 mm of mercury in patients with orthostatic hypotension. 1 minute of ankle movement. That is what this step is doing for you. Sit on the edge of the bed for a full 30 seconds. If you normally experience that gray, foggy, dizzy feeling when you stand in the morning, the sitting pause is directly targeting that reflex. You are giving your baroreceptors time to calibrate before you ask your heart to compensate for the full gravitational shift. Then stand slowly, pressing through your legs, not pulling up with your back. Once upright, stand still for 10 seconds before you take your first step. And if you've made it this far and you're getting value from this, type the number 3 in the comments. It's a simple way to let me know you're here and following along. Point 4, the temperature check. Optional but powerful. This one is less about what you do and more about what you notice. As you are sitting on the edge of the bed, briefly pay attention to how you feel. any chest heaviness that wasn't there last night, any unusual shortness of breath, any pain or pressure that radiates, any pounding heart sensation that feels different from typical morning grogginess. Most mornings you will notice nothing worth flagging, and that is the reassuring baseline. But creating a brief habit of conscious self-edge check in this 2-minute morning window means that on the morning when something is different, you are already paying attention. You have not rushed past the warning signal on your way to the coffee machine. This 4-point sequence takes 90 seconds to 2 minutes every single morning. It costs nothing, and it directly addresses the 3 biological factors: the hormonal surge, the postural pressure drop, and the blood viscosity that converge to make early morning the most dangerous cardiovascular window of the day. I want to pause for one specific group because there is an additional layer to this conversation that is directly relevant. If you are taking a beta blocker for blood pressure or heart rhythm, and a significant number of people over 60 or you need to understand something about how that medication interacts with the morning. Beta blockers work by blunting the response to adrenaline. That's the mechanism that makes them effective. But they also blunt your heart's ability to accelerate in response to the postural pressure drop when you stand. In other words, the compensatory spike that normally restores circulation when you go vertical, beta blockers slow that down. The Irish longitudinal study on aging published in a peer-reviewed journal found that beta blocker monotherapy was associated with more than twice the odds of initial orthostatic hypotension and more than 3 times the odds of sustained orthostatic hypotension compared to untreated individuals. That is not a small difference. This is not a reason to stop taking them. They are prescribed for important reasons and they save lives. But it means that if you are on a beta blocker, the graduated transition in 3 is not optional, it is essential. Your heart's automatic compensatory response is being modulated by the medication. You need to give your system even more time before you go fully upright. If you experience regular morning dizziness and you take a beta blocker, bring it up specifically at your next appointment. Ask your physician whether your dosing timing or dose level is contributing to your morning symptoms. That is a productive, specific conversation, and it starts with knowing that the morning transition is worth examining. Let me bring everything full circle. The morning is not randomly dangerous. It is specifically dangerous for specific physiological reasons that compound on each other in a narrow window of time. A hormonal surge that stresses arterial walls. A postural pressure drop that forces the heart to compensate aggressively. Blood that is thicker, more viscous, and more prone to clotting than at any other point in the day. And the habit that most people perform without a second thought, sitting straight up and standing immediately, takes all 3 of those factors and presses the accelerator. The 4-point waking protocol doesn't require medication. It doesn't require a gym. It doesn't require you to change anything about your diet, your evening routine, or your medical regimen. It requires you to put a glass of water on your nightstand tonight. And it requires 4 breaths, a gentle roll to your side, 30 seconds sitting at the edge of the bed with your ankles rotating, and a slow, deliberate stand. That is 90 seconds. That is the investment. I want to ask you one question in the comments. When you get out of bed in the morning, how fast do you go from flat to standing? Under 5 seconds? Under 10? Take a guess and write it below. I read every comment, and the range of answers tells me exactly how many people are in that 25-second danger window without knowing it. If this video gave you something you didn't have before, share it, text it to someone you care about, post it somewhere a person over 60 in your life will find it, because the people who need this most are not searching for it. They don't know to search for it. Subscribe if you haven't already. Every week I bring you exactly this, the specific research-grounded information about your body after 60 that tends to get crowded out in a 15-minute doctor's visit. Take care of your heart. It has been working for you without rest, without complaint, without a single day off for every year of your life. Give it a better morning starting